All right, thank you so much, gentlemen, as you kick us off. And as I said, earlier this year was this announcement around Lenacapavir. And I have to say, a bit of a name drop, I happened to be with the head of UNAIDS at the time and South Africa's Minister of Health. And for them, it was just such a spectacular, revolutionary announcement. So let's talk about how we got there. Peter, what do you see as the key drivers to progress around innovation and breakthroughs such as this? And also to really ensuring, regardless of the changing macroeconomic environment around health funding, that you just keep on keeping on.
Well, thanks. And just to put this in context, Dan and I have just been in Eswatini and seen the first deliveries on the African continent of Lenacapavir. And there's something incredibly exciting about moving from endless discussions that Dan and I and our teams have been having, along with other partners, to actually seeing the boxes on the shelves, the nurses being trained, and the thing that really struck me was the excitement of the frontline health workers. They really want this product, and they can see that it's going to make a huge difference. Now, how did we get here? Well, to start with, you need the innovation. So all credit to the scientists of Gilead Sciences who have actually come up with this game-changing innovation. But innovation without access is not terribly useful. And so the work that we've done together and with others on how to get the access affordable, how to get it at scale, and working particularly in countries with governments and communities and civil society, actually making sure that the people who can benefit the most are actually going to receive this. So there isn't a single answer to it, but the partnership makes a huge difference, and frankly, money makes a big difference.
All right, and as I said, we've seen, some of the fundamentals changing at a macro level, fundraising. So how do we ensure that regardless of what's happening, the progress is not stalled?
Well, there was a moment earlier this year when you'll all remember there was somewhat a degree of disruption to global health and global aid and development funding, where people were saying to me, are we still committed to going big on Lenacapavir? And I said, absolutely we are. I'm not quite sure how we're going to make it happen, but so I think one of the starting points is you can't lose the ambition. But also you've got to have, and I'd give huge credit to the Children's Investment Fund, Chris Horn, who came in and supported us with a very significant commitment. It's now $200 million, in part to support our ability to work with Gilead and to ensure a scaled rollout of Lenacapavir. And kind of knowing I had that money put us in a position to make things happen. But let's have no illusions. It's going to be really difficult in the current environment to make the most of this. And yet, I come from a banking and economics background. I'm not a doctor, a scientist. It's mad not to. I mean, it is so much, you save the lives. That's the biggest deal. But also from a pure economics perspective, if you can stop an 18-year-old young woman from getting infected from HIV, you're saving 60 years of antiretroviral treatment that somebody's going to have to pay for. And so just from an economics perspective, not seizing this opportunity is madness. And that's why we're absolutely determined to go for it in terms of supporting countries in making the use of this and other prevention tools in the pipeline as far as we can.
Okay, so it's a mindset, it's a passion, the money matters, but the principle really is what matters more, is what you are saying. Dan, let's turn to you, because all credit to you, the innovation as we're hearing about it. This week marks a significant milestone just in terms of some of those initial deliveries reaching some of the countries in the south. We've just referenced Eswatini, so maybe just give us your view of how it was received.
Well, it's hard to overstate the experience that Peter and I had yesterday. And the reason for that is this is the first time in the history of a novel medicine like this that medicine arrived in the global south the very same year it was approved in the north. So this medicine was only approved at the FDA at the end of June. And here, 5 months later, we have medicine on the ground, people being trained, to Peter's point, in 2 countries, and many, many more to follow. So, you know, and by the way, all credit I give to the Gilead scientists that worked 17 years on this medicine. It's extraordinary.
We forget how long it takes.
No, it's a very long, you need to be really perseverant and have some grit.
All right, so for somebody who's asking, what is Lenacapavir and why is it considered a breakthrough? Perhaps you could just simplify the science for us right now. We've heard the social impact aspect of it, the health impact, the numbers for future preventions and saving on health budgets. But what is it? What is this breakthrough? And why does this moment matter?
Well, it matters because it has the potential to save millions and millions of lives around the globe. So what is it? 17 years in the making. It's an extraordinary molecule. It's a brand new way of interfering with viral replication within HIV. It's called a capsid inhibitor. The scientists at Gilead went through 4,000 molecules over 17 years to find what our scientists and chemists call the unicorn of a molecule, one that can be as effective as lenacapavir is, but also have this very long half-life. And the reason that's important is because at the end of the day, what we need is people to have medicines that meet them where their lives are at. And what we know today, and we also pioneered the daily pill that prevents HIV, but lenacapavir was nearly 100% effective. The first trial was done here, largely in South Africa, 4,000 people, adolescent girls and women, and it was shown to be 100% effective with a twice-yearly administration of lenacapavir. I mean, and you don't have to take my word for it. Science Magazine called it the breakthrough of the year. It's been lauded for the that public health impact that it will have. And the reason that's important is because back to meeting people where they are. First of all, people don't like to take daily pills even if they're sick. Secondly, the stigma and discrimination associated with that. You have to adhere to this medicine in order for it to be effective. So if you miss doses or you stop taking it, you become vulnerable to HIV again. The advantage of this, and Peter and I saw it yesterday at the clinic in Eswatini, is that you can have a healthcare system that has outreach programs to the most vulnerable populations, and in Africa, 2/3 of the new cases are women. You find a way to make sure that they come into the clinic or the clinic goes to them, and just every 6 months, you're able to protect them 100% in a way that's both discreet and adherent.
All right, so lessons that we've learned from this experience. I think the fundamental one is what was referenced earlier, is that when it was approved in the north, you were then able to begin talking about shipments to the global south. So the timing has a lot of alignment in it. Why does that matter? Because we haven't quite seen things happening in that sequence before.
Well, yes, it matters a tremendous amount because at the end of the day, particularly with a disease like HIV, the vast majority of the 1.3 million new cases are in the global south. So if our scientists make a medicine, back to Peter's point, and it doesn't get to the people that need it, it doesn't matter. Right. So we had to think very differently. And I think there are 2 words I would say here: speed, which we've already talked about, partnership, and purpose. And working with the Global Fund, working with Peter, I mean, he's just one of the exemplary partners that was with us throughout this story and journey. But it started with, you have to go many years back to say, how did we think about the clinical trials? We involved, of course, clinicians, but also people from the community that said, this is what's important to us in the clinical trial design. And then we had a regulatory strategy that allowed for rapid approval. We're still in that process. But very importantly, and Gilead has pioneered this with other HIV medicines, immediately when we saw the trial results, we voluntarily licensed this royalty-free to 6 generic manufacturers. Okay. And those supplies will be available as early as 2027. Right. But that wasn't enough. Then we worked with partners to say, how do we fill this gap period of time? Regulatory-wise, we had figured that out, but we then worked with Global Fund in particular, U.S. government, other folks, to say, how do we get medicine to patients until the generics are available? And we produce the medicine at cost And the Global Fund then, through their donors, are able to make this available to people around the globe.
And it really sounds like a highly depoliticized environment in which to operate, unlike what we've seen with
It's human health. It's science.
unlike what we've seen with other issues
Absolutely.
in the recent past. Peter, let's get back to you, because as we said, constrained resources, countries are being asked to do more with less, and yet the demand is really, really high. We're talking about building resilient public healthcare systems. We are talking about scaling on the innovation, and then we want to talk about sustainability as well. So I'm not sure how you just go about making sense of this complex environment, but you've got to, and that's essentially the work that you do. So talk to us about, how you go about building these partnerships, thinking about sustainability, and then this equity that's also been referenced here today.
Yeah. Well, there isn't a simple answer, because, if there was, we would have solved it. But there's no doubt that low middle-income countries have to accelerate the journey towards self-reliance. So nationally financed, nationally led systems for health. And actually, South Africa is a good example, where almost 80% of South Africa's HIV spending is domestically financed. But one of the challenges is that what works for South Africa doesn't work for Sudan or different parts of the continent. There's a huge variety in terms of readiness and sort of progress towards self-reliance. But I think the underlying point is that governments across the continent are going to have to crack how to mobilize more money for health, and also, critically, how to spend it well. Because there is a lot of wastage or poor allocation decisions in the way that health spending works. So I think the constraint on resources is going to force a greater focus on efficiency and effectiveness. But I also think this point about speed is important. One of the things that, I came from the finance. I used to run a bank. And in the world of finance, people talk about sort of time equals money. If you can do something faster, you can almost always make more money out of it. But we don't tend to have quite that same attitude in health. But time does equal lives. I mean, when you think about South Africa, so South Africa has about 170,000 new HIV infections a year. So you think about that from a monthly basis, that's, 14,000 new HIV infections every month. So the quicker we can get into reducing that number, the quicker we can be saving people's lives, and the quicker we can actually be saving money. So I think one of the things that we're going to have to do in this resource-constrained environment is getting even better at moving fast with innovations, so that we can really make the most of these opportunities. And this is not unique to HIV. I mean, I see, dual active ingredient bed nets, spatial repellents in malaria. There are other instances, or the new generation of diagnostics in TB. And this is where suddenly we feel like we have a particular responsibility, because we are the largest procurer and investor in these diseases, to try and make that happen, to make the pathway from innovation to getting it to the people who can benefit as quickly as possible.
I mean, Dan was talking about some of his observations in the process of sort of bringing Lenacapavir to life and on stream, and the licensing with manufacturers. What are some of your observations, the lessons you've learned in this period that you think will really define funding healthcare, funding innovation, improving on procurement systems going forward?
I'd say a couple of things. One is, and the Lenacapavir story is a good example of this, is doing multiple things in parallel. You don't solve one problem in the process and then go on to the next one. You kind of solve for the generics, and you solve for everything in parallel, because that's the only way you can make things work fast. And that does involve getting a lot of different actors involved, and it can get quite complicated. The second thing is, we've always got to keep our eye on the prize. The prize is the human health impact. And the faster we can get that human health impact at scale, the more powerful. And I think as long as we can keep that as our, because I think sometimes what happens is people get, they get sort of focused on the process. You know, we're going through this stage of clinical trials, stage 3, and, you know, this bit of regulatory approval and things like this. And the process can kind of get its own dynamic. And I think the way we cut through that and make it work for human benefit is just saying, we want this outcome and we want it as fast as possible.
I think life sciences is his next career,
Absolutely.
without a doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, a lot of people will say, never forget your why, and I think that's what you're saying. Don't forget why you are doing what you do.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about what happens next. We've seen incredible progress in a 6-month period or less than. So where do we go from here? And whatever life throws at us, shall we say that, in a world of uncertainty and unknowns, how do we ensure that, you know, we continue the why, ending infectious diseases and supporting innovation and creating access for all the people who need it? Dan, you first.
Sure, I'll start. I think there are two things that come to mind. I mean, first of all, we are firmly focused on the rollout of Lenacapavir. I mean, we're, in many regards, even though it's been a 17-year journey, we've just arrived at the starting line, you know, in Eswatini yesterday. So I think it's critically important, and to Peter's point, I mean, it won't be a straight road all the time. We'll have to determine where the funding is coming from, how to work with different partners, how to make sure the local governments and partners are working. So in the next 18 months, being able to roll this out across the continent is our clear focus. But beyond that, of course, you know, our central role is innovation at the end of the day. I mean, so we are working on next generation medicines already. We have a once yearly version of Lenacapavir that's just entered clinical trials. We have long-acting treatments for HIV in clinical trials, which again can get at the populations of people, even in Eswatini yesterday or here in South Africa, that are not served well by a daily pill. It doesn't work for their circumstances of their life. And moving to, you know, once weekly oral pills or once every 6-month injections is kind of, and everything in between is what we're working on. The other thing I would just say, back to your point, is Gilead's a company that's focused on, you know, infectious diseases. And so we do a lot of work on the continent where outbreaks of diseases occur. The Marburg outbreak just recently in Rwanda, Ebola outbreaks. We have medicines that are put to work right away when those outbreaks occur to try to quell, so that we don't have, you know, epidemics across the continent or across other areas. So that's our role, is to make sure that innovation keeps coming, and then that we work with partners on access with purpose.
Proactive as well.
Absolutely.
Peter.
Well, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't point out that the Global Fund has a replenishment summit this Friday.
I was waiting when the commercial was going to come.
And you know, the reality is, you can't do this if you don't have the money. I mean, you know, ultimately somebody has to buy these innovations and deploy them and pay for the services to deliver them to people. And until all the poorer countries in the world are in a position to do that at scale, and some are in a better place than others, there's going to be a need for external funding. And we are already in a situation where, if I look at the malaria world, we have great innovations which we're not making the most of. And we're not making the most of in a way that is costing lives and is also kind of economically irrational, because we would reduce the long-term cost of malaria. And, you know, Lenacapavir, we've committed alongside PEPFAR to roll Lenacapavir out to 2 million people as rapidly as we can. The reality is that the kind of true target market, the people who could benefit, is probably more like 8 to 10 million people. And the sooner we can get to that kind of scale, the sooner we will really bend the curve on HIV.
All right, so I just want to help you do your job better. So with the replenishment summit coming up, what are we talking about, 18 billion that you're targeting?
That's the target we set out in our investment case in February. And that is the same target as we set out in the last replenish. We replenish on a 3-year cycle. this is a tough environment in which to be raising funds. And look, donor countries have faced very real fiscal and political pressures that make it more challenging. But this is a fantastic way to turn donor dollars into human impact at scale and to make a huge difference to hundreds of millions of people's lives.
Thank you so much to you, Peter Sands, Executive Director of the Global Fund, Daniel O'Day, Chairman and CEO of Gilead Sciences. Thank you so much for talking us through Labs to People.
Thank you
very much.